This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. It's tax season, and we're all a bit tired of numbers. But here's one you need to hear. $16.5 billion. That's how much the IRS flagged for possible identity fraud last year. Now here's a good number. 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it. Guaranteed. Save up to 40% your first year at LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Talkin podcast. We're taping this on April Fool's Day, April 1st, 2025. David Campbell, your host. Terry Pluto's here. What's going on, Terry?
I'm with David Campbell, so we're ready to go on April Fool's Day. So what is stranger than fiction that we should talk about?
Oh, man. Well, we can start with the Browns, I guess. But
there we go. Exactly. That is exactly right. I try to give you a layup here, and you took it.
All right. Why don't we start with the Browns? Also, Terry, toward the end of the podcast, I've kind of put them toward the end, but we got some really fun emails from fans. We asked for not spring training, for a home opener, baseball home opener stories. The home opener is 1 week from today down at the ballpark on April 8th. So we'll get to those, and we'll talk some Cavs. We got some CSU basketball, a lot to get to. But our colleague, Mary Kay Cabot, is down in Florida at the annual NFL meetings. And I know you wrote about this today, Terry, but Jimmy and Dee Haslam spoke yesterday, and Jimmy Haslam, I guess for all intents and purposes, has put a closing chapter on the Deshaun Watson era in Cleveland. I guess I can read the quote, and then we can talk about it a little bit. But he said, "Let's address the elephant in the room. We took a big swing and miss with Deshaun. We thought we had the quarterback. We didn't, and we gave up a lot of draft picks to get him. So we've got to dig ourselves out of that hole." And you wrote today, Terry, and I think we've been seeing some emails from some fans, I know you've been getting them, about how do you hold the owners accountable for something like this? And I know you have some thoughts on that, but what was your reaction when you saw what Jimmy Haslam said about Deshaun Watson yesterday?
Well, they're on script because it's the same thing Andrew Berry said. Remember at the end of the year, he said Wood took a big swing, organizational decision and all that. The only difference was that I think he said, in the end, you hold D&I accountable. He said something like that, didn't Jimmy? Or I think something along those lines.
Yep.
That's the only difference. But the question that I have, and fans get very frustrated by this, whether it's like they wish the Dolans would spend more or whatever, is, they want us to hold ownership accountable. And my point always is, how? I mean, yeah, we could vent and all this stuff. We live in the age of rage where everybody just screams and emails and capital letters and all kinds of stuff. But if you get real about it, I mean, for example, Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski are accountable to the Haslams. They're their boss. And with we've seen it before, one word or two words make it, you're fired. You're fired. That's it. But nobody's going to fire the owners except the owner. I mean, once in a great while, and it took forever, like in the NBA when they forced the guy that owned the Clippers, Donald Sterling, to leave. And it took, racist tapes and everything else. It still took like about another year. And it took, I think, like a decade to run Dan Snyder out of the Washington Commanders. And it took a long time, even several years, for Ted Stepien, who was just, very deplorable, for them to force it. But Ted actually was hurt by finances. That's why he ended up having to sell. So David, how do you hold these guys accountable?
I mean, you can't. Like you just said it, Terry. You can't really, other than, I mean, we see this in European soccer a lot, where fans will just walk out with, 3 minutes. The team has lost 12 matches in a row, and the entire stadium walks out with 12 minutes left. Like we see that, but the fans do not have a lot of power unless they organize something like that. But not buying merchandise is something we've seen fans suggest, and not going to games. Those are the only two things that we've seen fans suggest.
Pretty much it.
I don't know if that's going to happen. I really don't.
And suppose it did. most of their money is coming from TV revenue and all this other stuff anyway. The NFL, they used to say printing money. Now it's like a machine that just wires money to these accounts. It's incredible because you could tell how much money they're making, how much the salary cap keeps going up, 20, 30 million per team per year, because that is, lined up TV revenues and some other things in a formula. And that just shows, and it doesn't matter whether you're any good at it or not. Now, I will say this, the Haslams want to win, but they don't know how to win. Because I get that, well, they don't want to win. No, they want to win. But that doesn't make you necessarily a good owner. You have to know how to win. And for example, they may say the Dolans really don't want to win, but they sort of know how to win the way they run their team because the standings are your report card.
Yeah, and for people to say that, I mean, they go to these annual meetings every year, and you want to be walking around with a Super Bowl championship.
Yeah.
Like that is a sign of these people, and we've talked about this a lot, Terry. These people are billionaires. They all have money and power, and winning a Super Bowl is prestige. That's what they want. So I think they all want to win, regardless of what their salary cap situation is.
And the other thing is
for
the Haslams, the stakes are high because they are in the middle of the stadium thing, and we're not going to go into the weeds of that. But in general, when you're trying to have any sort of project like that go through, you'd rather have the team winning and doing well than being 3-14 and having to get rid of the big, and basically being labeled with, you just made the worst trade in NFL history. So that's what they're dealing with. Now, when you make let's flip it back to football there, David Campbell. So now you are 3-14. You are digging out, to quote the owner. What does that mean?
So I've been thinking about from day one, your columns about the Deshaun Watson trade, Terry. I think you have used the word desperation over and over with the Browns. It was a move of desperation for the Browns to do that. And from what I'm seeing, this is the opposite of that. Like they are not desperate for a quarterback. They are not falling over themselves to sign somebody big in free agency. They're not throwing huge dollars around. Like this is the opposite of desperation. And I've found that change in mindset to be very interesting right now because I think it reflects, we've talked about this a lot, Terry. The Browns are going back to basics. It's like we're going to do what we know how to do well. We're going to do it the best we can, and we're going to try and win games that way. We're not going to be getting out of our comfort zone and coming up with all these crazy RPO plays. Like we're going back to basics. And this lack of desperation, I think, just really is reflecting that right now.
I mean,
are you seeing that?
If you look back when they took over in 2020, this regime, what did it do? Granted, they were given some good players by the previous regime. So, but they basically put Baker in an offense that fit his skill set, Nick Chubb. They didn't make a lot of big moves. They just tried to get things organized, and they brought a sense of calm after the whole Freddie Kitchens, all the things that went on there. And they won. I believe they were 11-5. And then the next year is when Baker gets hurt and all those things go on. And what I see there is they rated Kenny Pickett. I think they sit there and they made a list of quarterbacks available: Aaron Rodgers, Joe Flacco, Carson Wentz, Jameis. I forgot who else has signed at other places. And I think Pickett ended up being fairly high on that list. Who would you rather have? So let's go trade for this guy. Let's get that done first. And then we'll figure out what we want to do after that. We're going to draft a young quarterback, whether we draft them at 2 or we draft them at 8 or we draft them at 30 or whatever it is. We're going to take one, and then we'll just add a third one, whoever it may be. And then also, I'm not a big Kenny Pickett fan, but look, you could ask me 1,000 times, would you rather have Kenny Pickett or DTR? I mean, there's nothing to discuss. There just isn't. Of course, I want Kenny Pickett on still a rookie contract. I am curious to see. All right, let me ask you this, Dave Campbell, because I haven't decided, but we'll throw you out there. You do that to me all the time. All right, the first pick is Cam Ward. You have the second pick. You're the Cleveland Browns, and you?
So I am getting the sense with the way they have been talking up Kenny Pickett, and again, not desperation. I think their attitude is, listen, we're going to have some quarterbacks. Kenny Pickett's going to be one of them, and we're going to be fine. So I'm getting this sense that they're not going to take a quarterback at number 2, and I think it's going to be either Hunter or Abdul Carter. I think they need touchdowns and they need turnovers. And Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter, if you play them at cornerback, those guys can help create turnovers, which will get your offense back on the field, get your defense off the field. And you've got a couple of guys there that can be just star players for 10 years. It's just my gut. I don't have anything to base that on. But this way they're talking up Kenny Pickett this week, I just get the feeling that they're not going to reach for stuff anymore. They're not going to hyperventilate and like, we got to do this. It feels like taking Shedeur Sanders at number 2. Everybody has him evaluated way lower. And I don't think the Browns want to reach on this. That's the sense I'm getting. So I don't think they will. What do you think?
I would be surprised if they did that with Sanders at number 2. It would be interesting. Suppose, although somebody moves up to 2, they probably want Sanders. Why else would they do it? Unless somebody, like, say, wanted Abdul Carter, and you could drop down to 7 or 8, and then you could take, Sanders and take somebody else. I mean, I guess that's a possibility, probably remote. I think when they looked at Pickett, they thought a couple of things. Number one, he was with, Canada? Was it Matt Canada, the offensive coordinator there at Pittsburgh? And he is not highly regarded, at all.
That's why he's not there anymore. Yep.
Right. And I think they also said, this guy, you put him in Kevin's offense, he might be able to surprise people. Jacoby Brissett did, some others. And meantime, we can buy some time with him for all the, anti-Kenny Pickett thing. What's his record? 14-10, I think, as a starter. Now, some of that has to do with, it's like having a good restaurant. Well, sometimes a lot of it has to do with location, where you are. Because the Steelers, they were able to certainly keep you in the game with their defense and forcing turnovers. But nonetheless, I think they looked at the fact that he had 25 starts or whatever it was, and I believe he had 14 interceptions. As I mentioned, though, a lot of times the flip side is sometimes you're going to throw some interceptions if you're throwing quite a few touchdown passes. Otherwise, Cody Kessler would be in the NFL still, just throwing 3-yard passes if that's all it took. Stay away from interceptions. So I think that's what they want. Hunter's interesting to me because he is just a game breaker on offense. I think if you put the ball in his hands more but also, as you said, cornerback's such a premier position, and it's almost like you bring this toy in with 2 different position things to play, and you see what you can get out of it. You might have a star at one or the other.
Well, and not to mention what he might be able to do returning punts
sure,
and running some different kinds of plays for him. So I don't know. Again, I don't have anything to base this on. I just get the sense that they're not going to be reaching for things. And number 2, they have some good players available at number 2, and I don't know. I just think reaching for a quarterback is not something that they feel like they have to do.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
I could be wrong.
But they have to win some games, David.
Definitely.
They can't come back at 6-11, much less 3-14. Otherwise, they're all going to be looking for work. Somebody will be held accountable, and it won't be the owners.
That's true. Yeah. The clock is ticking. So, all right, we got a couple of emails here that are quarterback related. I thought we'd get to those real quick from listeners. Dan Polster is the first one, and Dan says, longtime follower chiming in on my thoughts on the upcoming draft and why I would not draft Shedeur Sanders at number 2. My comments are less of a knock on Shedeur Sanders than they are the Browns as an organization. For all we know, he may turn into a great NFL player. However, a college player's success in the NFL can be unpredictable, even for the best players being evaluated by the best NFL teams. However, the Browns seem to have a track record of missing on even can't-miss players, such as Courtney Brown or Trent Richardson. I have seen no evidence that the current regime is any better at evaluating talent. As such, all the more concern in drafting a player second overall who has as many question marks as Shedeur. Unlike other teams with a history of success, we cannot simply gamble, make another mistake, and then later sit back and laugh about it. San Francisco can do that after making a mistake with Trey Lance because they eventually discovered a Brock Purdy and have a history of success in the league. In order to compete as well as save face with the fans, unfortunately, the Browns really need to be conservative here and not take a chance with a player who has such a potential for failure in the league. My personal desire would be to trade down and stockpile picks, the idea being that the more players we take, the better a chance that some of them will actually succeed. Sad that I feel the need to think in such ways, but I have no confidence they will otherwise make a good choice here.
Of course, that led to, I'm not saying he would go this far, but that led to the 2016 draft where they traded down twice. They had 5,042 picks, and you really didn't come out with much of anything from that draft because you still have to pick them correctly. But in general, I mean, you'd rather more picks than fewer because that is why the damaging thing of the Watson trade was taking 6 picks right off the top, including 3 first rounders, and the possibility of using those first rounders to move up. Because what Houston did, it's really hard to track all the players that Houston got from the drafts from Watson because they were used, some of those picks, to move up in the draft to take impact players. But
Will Anderson and
yeah, it wasn't directly, but part of the picks are in that, but they were just sitting there going. That's why the Browns were trying to even give them Baker Mayfield and some other things in those trade talks, and they go, no, we want 6 picks, we want 3 first rounders, and that's what we want. And of course, they also realized that they were about ready to trade everything except Lake Erie for them, and that was. They held out for that. So that's an interesting thought. Yeah, I'll just tell you, David, this is, football drafts or whatever. This is not my thing. I'm not good at this. I'm not good at evaluating football players.
Half the teams aren't good at it.
No, they
so
aren't.
Yes, we shouldn't feel bad.
They aren't. And I feel better like watching, a basketball draft or whatever, just because you can't. And by the way, people who are sports writers or whatever to act like they have the same degree of whatever knowledge or experience in all the main sports is ludicrous. You can't possibly do that. You can still have an opinion, but once in a while, like now, I just throw it out, say this is not really my thing. For example, but it was easy for me to, go negative on the Watson thing because that's a general sports business question. That would apply to any franchise. When you were looking at that. When you do those things. So a lot of the times the things that I'm writing is this a wise way to do sports business, regardless of the franchise, as opposed to getting into the like looking at Luis Ortiz, who I did feel I know a little bit more about baseball than football. But I was really watching him with the Guardian, but I was really watching him closely. Even still, I couldn't figure out exactly why he suddenly can't throw strikes. And I'm sure a lot of these guys, as you said, they draft these players and they do look, you got all kinds of film and they look good and you put them out there and suddenly, every pass they're throwing is high and wide, or they just get in the pocket, and they did have pretty good presence in the pocket in college. And now they just act like they're not a deer in the headlights. They're just like running for their life even before anything happens. It's got to drive them nuts.
Oh, I mean, have to have our requisite Moneyball reference from the movie, but there's one Brad Pitt says to the scout, you think you can predict how these kids are going to do when you draft them, and you can't. You don't know any more about one guy than you do another. It's just it's so unpredictable. So, all right, so I'm going to ask you.
And by the way, and just to the point, like for example, when the Browns drafted Courtney Brown, by far, I mean, he was the Abdul Carter of that draft. And he was on his way to having a good year, and he got hurt. And he came back, but he was never the same. And I was told, now, if they'd have had the kind of micro knee surgery stuff that they do now and that, he would have been able to come back better. But back then, the surgery was not very good. And so he just didn't have the same quickness and burst that he had. And he just basically was a role player for 7 years. But sometimes it's just luck. Yep. You draft the right guy and he gets hurt.
So I'm going to ask you a question about the quarterbacks, and then we have a really interesting email here about Kirk Cousins. But so Terry, if they went into the season with Kenny Pickett, let's say late first round, they move up into the end of the first round. They don't take
Jackson
somebody
Dart.
at 2. Yeah, let's say they get him high second, late first.
Whatever.
They trade up, and then Joe Flacco. Are you happy with that?
Oh, I'll go for that.
Yeah.
I don't think they'll take Flacco. If they wanted Flacco, he's been like that out there. I mean, he probably feels like this is turning into 2023 again. The phone's not ringing.
Yeah. Well, the Aaron Rodgers domino is still waiting to fall, and I think once that does, we'll see it. So anyway, okay.
Yeah, he's probably telling himself that, but no, this is like a thing. You start getting rejected, and things haven't gone well. I mean, it's hard to keep your mind in a positive place. Because remember, didn't he interview with New York? I believe Flacco did, and they took Jameis. And he's probably going, they found the one guy that throws more interceptions than I do, and they took him.
Yeah, but you never know what's going on behind the scenes, though, Terry. They could be talking to him saying, hey, listen, we're just waiting on one thing, but we're really want to keep you in the mix here. I don't know. You never know what's going on.
Never know, but I guess maybe to me, it's just a no-brainer. Pickett, Flacco, and your pick. That's it. Yeah, go play ball.
Okay, so Kirk Cousins was in Cleveland last week, kind of taking a tour of barbecue restaurants and Chipotle. So we got a really interesting email here from Carl Carlson. Carl is a listener who lives in New Hampshire. He says, hi, guys. As you continue to ponder the Browns' QB plans, could this scenario be playing out? The Browns and Falcons have worked out a deal for Kirk Cousins, but Cousins doesn't want to get penixed again, so he won't waive his no-trade clause until he knows that he's the clear starter and won't be upstaged by a highly drafted rookie again. He's going to use his power to make sure he likes his new situation. Meanwhile, the Falcons don't want to wait until after the draft to execute the trade because they'll miss out on a 2025 pick. So what's stopping the Browns and Falcons from making that trade during the draft, just before the pick that they've agreed upon in the trade? Cousins sees that the Browns don't take a QB high in the first 2 rounds, and he waives the clause. The deal goes through, and the Falcons have their pick in this draft instead of 2026. The Browns then have Cousins, Pickett, and a rookie that they grab in the later rounds, along with number 2 pick Travis Hunter and one of those explosive running backs at number 33. What do you think?
I think he thought better than I did and deeper on this. I like it.
It's really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. First of all, you got to remember Cousins. By the way, Cousins' father, I forgot his first name, but he's a well-known non-denominational pastor, and was in the early days of a big church called Willow Creek in Chicago, and then later on to somewhere else. And they were all, at Willow Creek, they were always known for kind of their 2 and 3 stage thinking and how to build a church and everything. Stay with me on this. Mm-hmm. So if you watch Cousins, remember how he kept letting himself get franchised and all that other stuff to keep his options open? Then, I mean, if you're Atlanta, why did you give him a no trade along with that contract? But of course, he asked for it. He's got it. Now he's got you there. So you could be correct. I mean, if he is thinking about Cleveland or whatever, it's like, let's see what they do, because I'm not in the mood to have this. I have a couple bad games or whatever, and I'm done. And I really think that there's some real possibility with that. I'm not sure how that works on the cap, David, because it doesn't matter. Remember, it's not about we'll pay, half his salary. That's not the question. The question is the salary cap numbers.
Yeah, Mary Kay wrote a lot about this over the last few days, that there's basically 3 big hurdles, and that's one of them. The no trade clause is one, the salary cap. So anyway, there's a lot that would have to happen for this deal to come through. But hey, it's an interesting thing to think about.
Well, it is, and actually, if you're now to go to the, I'm sorry, who sent the good email? Who was that?
Oh, it's Carl from New Hampshire. Yeah, Carl Carlson.
Yeah, Carl Carlson got it right, because if you look at Cousins' entire career and kind of how he was trained, I say, by his dad and that, you play by the rules, but you also are very, very strategic in how you look at this. It's a business, and you want to make sure there. How about this, though? I'm not sure I would go this way, but Cousins, I forgot the year of the draft, but it was the year that Washington took RG3 number 2, and then they took Cousins in the 4th round. And, RG3 is long gone. Cousins is still playing. How about taking
building that church?
Will Howard in the 4th round, 3rd round, after somebody else? You just pile them up.
Take 2 guys, yeah.
This is the only time I've seen that, where you took a guy real high and then you took another guy like that. I think that was the Shanahan, Mike Shanahan front office that did that.
All right. Well, the draft is coming up in, 3 weeks from Thursday already, Terry. First round will be on April 24th. I guess we could run through some of these rule changes real quick. I don't know if you have any thoughts on them, but I think I was saying a couple months ago that they're probably going to move the touchback spot on kickoffs from the 30 to the 35 because it wasn't punitive enough.
Mm-hmm.
And they did that. So from now on, when you kick a ball off and it goes into the end zone, instead of in the landing zone, it's going to come out to the 35. That's the way the rule was in the XFL, UFL. I can't keep those leagues straight. But anyway, they borrowed it from that other league, and now it's going to be the 35-yard line. And they're projecting that's going to boost the kickoff return rate up dramatically from 32.8%.
Yeah, and they projected all the excitement from their kickoff rules last year, too.
Well, we'll see what it does. They think it'll be a lot. That extra 5 yards will incentivize people to hit the landing zone. So the tush push has been tabled. After getting some support, they're not going to vote on it. They're going to let it sit for now, but it might be brought up again in May. And they are going to, in overtime, let both teams have the ball regardless of what happens on the first possession. So I think that was to make playoffs and regular season the same.
Yeah, well, that just makes sense. I mean, that's because then basically you lose a game on a coin flip.
Yep. All right.
Okay.
I think we're done with the Browns, right? You want to take a break here?
Yes, we are. Yes, that sounds good.
Okay, when we get back, we're going to talk some Guardians, and I want to ask you, what do you think they should do with Luis Ortiz after a rough start last night? We'll get into that and more when we return on Terry's Talkin. Hey, we're back on Terry's Talkin. Quick plug for Terry's weekly newsletter. It comes out every Wednesday at noon. It's chock full of great stuff. Insider information, contract breakdowns, fun stories about Earl Weaver and other things.
Yeah.
Always a good read. So check it out. You can go to cleveland.com/Pluto and subscribe. It's at the top there. You get 2 weeks free trial. Click on the blue bar at the top of cleveland.com/Pluto. At the top, you'll get a link that'll take you to subscription. You can sign up and you get 2 weeks free. So, all right, Terry, the Guardians, 2-2 after their first 4 games, and they are tied for the division lead with the White Sox.
You're a White Sox. Weren't you a White Sox fan growing up?
I kind of like both teams. I like the Cubs and the White Sox. I don't know if that was allowed.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well,
what are you thinking so far? I think there's probably some good things to talk about, some bad things to talk about. We need to get into the Luis Ortiz situation, but what are your general impressions so far?
Well, the good thing is Arias has played better than I thought he would. It's early, but he has. Manzardo, I had high expectations, but I mean, he just been crushing the ball. It's like he started when he came back up from the minors in September. It carried in the playoffs. It went into spring training, and I'm not saying let's get a Cooperstown ready, but he had the pedigree of an impact hitter when they got him. In fact, I know some people from Tampa Bay because I was talking to some of them not wanting to trade, and they go, well, it helps Savali helps us because he said, we really like this guy, and they were surprised, they were in the media that Tampa Bay traded him. And one of the reasons was he's not very good defensively, but, David, in fact, all right, it's another Earl Weaver one, but I can't help it. We have to have the weekly one.
Yes.
When somebody would say to Weaver, well, all he can do is hit. We've got stop right there. How many guys can really hit? I could get a whole bunch of guys that get field, but how many guys can really hit? And that always stuck with me. Just like in basketball, you hear, well, all he can really do is shoot. Well, stop right there, especially now more than ever. that's a prize skill. So Manzardo, thank goodness, when the Guardians insisted on him in that Savali trade, and ended up, I believe, being just 1-for-1, because they just really believe that this guy, whether they could probably make him into an okay first baseman, but all he can do is hit. So that's been a good two good things.
Yeah, I just want to say, Terry, in the opener, the Royals, I think, went to the left-hander in the bullpen twice when he was coming up to bat, and man, he made them pay twice, which is really good to see because he's great against righties for sure, but he has had an up and down time against lefties.
Yeah,
and he's hitting everything right now.
But if you watched his swing, because I remember when they made the trade, I found a bunch of videos online. Now this is, like I said, where I feel more comfortable talking about it. Covering minor league baseball for a year and then the major leagues for 6. You could see him hitting all these balls in the gaps, left center and right center. He was not a dead pull hitter whatsoever. And thinking, this guy, and he has a shorter swing. It's not a big strikeout prone swing. Why can't he be respectable against lefties? There was no reason to simply dismiss it. When you watch certain guys, you watch, for example, Will Brennan, for whatever reason, hopeless against lefties. I think his career is like 180. And I was a little surprised there, but I kind of watched it break down. It just seemed like he bailed out a lot on lefties and was swinging just with his arms, and his front foot was going one way and the hands were going the other. Right now we'll see how it goes. But, Big Christmas is having big trouble against right-handed pitching. It even goes back to last year. And so we'll see. But, yeah, this guy there, and I'm not a big Arias guy. I'm a doubter, but I give him credit. He's come out and he's looked good early. Go ahead. Who do you like?
Oh, you talked about Manzardo. I think the defense has been really good, and that'll be, what do they say in football? Defense travels or whatever, but I think defense travels in baseball too, and I think that's going to serve them well down the road. Do you want to get into Triston McKenzie now?
Sure.
I guess we could do that. So he was not happy about starting the season in the bullpen, and last night comes in a 7-2 game. They're losing, and puts in kind of 2 important innings, I thought. What did you think of Triston McKenzie? 2 innings last night, 1 hit, 1 walk, 1 strikeout, 26 pitches. I got some other data here I thought might be interesting. I can throw that out.
Keep going.
Okay. So I was looking back to 2022, which was, I think, the year when he went 11-11, right, with a 296. And if you look at the breakdown, he threw his 4-seam fastball 1,575 times, right? It was 56% of his pitches. And then his curveball and slider were exactly the same. He threw 616 of each of them. So that's about 22%.
Wow.
So 56% fastballs, and then 22% curveballs, 22% sliders, right?
Okay.
And that seems like when he was most effective was when he didn't have to just run that fastball up there all the time.
And the other good thing about his curveball back then was sort of an over the top, 12-6, and it was, I don't know how many miles slower than his fastball, but it was a significant difference because I wrote about this in the column I did on Ben Lively over the weekend. And Weaver reference number 2, but remember he was the first guy ever to use a radar gun, and the reason being he said he liked to see it tired. He goes, but I really wanted to see the difference, the variance between the guy's fastball and whatever his off-speed pitch was, because he wanted it to be at least 10 miles difference. And I think Triston was back then, that curveball was a 10-mile difference from his fastball, and that helped him.
Yeah, so I was just looking last night to see what he was throwing, right?
Okay.
And of the 26 pitches, there were 20 fastballs, which is 77%, and 3 curveballs and 3 sliders. And if you look at the heat map, I think this is from Baseball Savant. I wish I could show it to everybody. But like his 4-seam fastball, he was just pounding the strike zone with it. And when he missed, it wasn't by much. The 3 curveballs, 1 was in the strike zone, 2 were kind of down and not really close. And his slider, 3 sliders, 2 in the strike zone, 1 that wasn't close. So anyway, but I guess my point is 20 fastballs, 3 curveballs, 3 sliders. Like that's not the mix that he is going to want, but it was a start, right? It was a good 2 innings.
Out of the bullpen. That's exactly how you do the bullpen. It's the John Hart theory. of you put a guy who, especially a starter, was in the bullpen, and he would say you give him a pitch and a half. In other words, one main pitch, who basically you let to use it like 2/3 of the time or however you want to break it down. And then another pitch would be a much smaller percentage. You do that so you can have this guy build up his confidence by sticking with his best pitch for a couple innings, get some people out, and put him back together again. So that is the big thing there. That's what was encouraging there, is that Triston didn't go out there and try to pitch like a starter. He went out there to go get outs. Remember, he said he was willing to do that after I have to admit, I like Triston, but I listened to that about I was disappointed about, not being out of the rotation or whatever. Hey, the only reason you weren't in the minors is because you're out of minor league options. And I think they didn't want to risk somebody grabbing you and maybe putting you in the bullpen for somebody else.
Yeah, but again, a good first step.
Yes, absolutely.
His four-seam fastball was coming in at 94 last night,
which a couple miles more than normal.
That's the fastest that he's had, I think, in his career. It's only one game, but the slider was coming in at 87.8 average for the three pitches, and the curveball was coming in at 80.
Okay, there's your difference. Remember we talked about that?
Mm-hmm.
94 to 80. There's your 10 plus.
The variety.
Yes. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I'm just wondering, I keep thinking about Avila last year.
Oh.
I think there's going to be some appearances coming up where Triston McKenzie will get maybe 3 or whatever. And I'm interested to see when he starts maybe getting longer, if he is going to try and work that curveball and slider more as he goes along. And yes, first inning, you need to come out and pound the strike zone with fastballs, but how's he going to mix it up and because that's what's going to get him back in the rotation, I think, is being able to throw those other two pitches.
My view is I just want him to pitch well. And if it's going to be bullpen, do this, fine. And you sit him down and say, first of all, maybe the bullpen would be better for you because you won't be putting your arm in those stressful situations, start throwing 80 to 100 pitches. Because that hangs over him, that elbow thing. Secondly, you can make a lot of money out of the bullpen too.
That's true.
And especially in the age of bullpen games and everything else, just cool it, pitch and a half, have at it. And that's, to me, the fact that the velocity was up and that he was getting it over the plate. Because remember how last year when he was sent to the minors, he had the terrible combination of leading the American League in home runs and walks. Just the absolute worst that you could have. So you're right. That was a pleasant one.
So now,
okay. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Terry, so, like in basketball, if somebody's getting minutes, somebody else isn't getting minutes. I'm just wondering about this kind of tug of war, yin and yang. Triston McKenzie and Luis Ortiz, right? So Luis Ortiz has struggled in spring training. He goes out last night in his first start, 7-2 loss to San Diego, 4 2/3 innings, 9 hits, 7 earned runs, 4 walks, 2 strikeouts, 90 pitches, and a 1-game ERA of 13.50. But there's going to kind of be this it's kind of like a sliding thing. Like, when does Luis Ortiz hit the point where they can't trot him out there every 5th day if this continues? And when does Triston McKenzie get longer? And there's going to be like a mesh point where they might need to flip roles.
Or
how do you see this playing out?
Or else you got Nick Hazy in the minors, who they like very much. And you may, sometimes when you've had a guy that struggled for a couple of years, he finally has some success, you don't mess with it. I'm very serious on this. If they could finally get something, when was the last time they got anything out of Triston that was really good? 22, wasn't it? That is 3 years ago. And that's, if I were sitting down with Triston, I would say, look, this gives a chance for you to rebuild your career. Just go with it. It's not about what you want. Sometimes what we want is not good for us, parents. How many times have we said that to our kids? And so that's the same thing here. Meanwhile, Ortiz, I would be loved to sit in a meeting with Carl Wills or somebody to break this down. What happened to this guy who averaged fewer than 3 walks per 9 innings with the Pirates, and pitched what? It's not like he was terrible for Pittsburgh at all, but it's like he can't throw strikes. He's just sort of all over the place. His velocity is fine. Was it like 94 to 96? That's what I remember watching last night. I will say this. Now, I don't think there's a big variance there, maybe in speeds, but there was nothing that jumped out to me other than he's not throwing strikes. But it wasn't like, sometimes you watch the guys wind up and, the left hand's going this way and the right arm like behind, and you don't even know how the heck he's getting the ball to home plate without it bouncing. That's not this guy. His windup's pretty compact, but he's a mess. And because this is the same junk from spring training. I saw parts on TV twice from spring training. It looked like the same guy. It's like, yikes.
Okay, so we do have an listener email about Ortiz. Why don't I read this from Tom Byler, longtime listener? Tom says, while the Guards front office has a decent track record on trades, dumping Andres Gimenez, in essence, for batting practice pitcher Ortiz may be their worst. Mr. Gimenez is batting cleanup for the Jays and already has 3 homers and 5 RBI.
I know. Can you believe
addition
that?
to his platinum glove second base. Apparently, Jays hitting coaches were able to find a way to help Gimenez that Guardians gurus missed. Good for Andres. I hope he has a long, successful career. Meanwhile, the Guards pitching factory is getting nowhere with Ortiz, who followed up a horrible spring training with a horrible first start. When a pitcher struggles over several straight appearances like Ortiz has, it often turns out they were trying to pitch through an injury. Hope that is not the case, and I hope Carl Willis and crew can get him figured out.
That's been in the back of my mind too. Has he been hurt? Now, what we have seen sometimes with guys who are hurt is they're throwing hard anyway. We saw that last year with Shane Bieber. That was a stunning thing. Remember about Bieber? He pitched 12 innings, scoreless, struck out 20. And then
the injury.
They call a press conference. Oh, he's having Tommy John surgery. And I remember I was on it. There's only like 5 or 6 of us on this call, that they have with Chris Antonetti. And, they asked him basically and said, Chris, now, I don't mean any like disrespect or whatever, but I've been around a long time. So have you? Because have you ever seen a guy throw 12 scoreless innings with 20 strikeouts and need Tommy John surgery? And he said, Terry, all I can tell you, he said before the last start, he said his arm didn't quite feel right. And then when he was done, it didn't feel. He goes, and we did the MRIs and the test, and it came back he needed it.
Incredible.
In other words, he passed the eye test but flunked the MRI. And so is there something wrong with Ortiz on that? I don't know.
All right. Well, the plot will thicken there. I'm guessing as things go along, they're going to have to decide if it. And who knows? He might turn it around the next couple of starts.
But it was amazing. You brought up Avila, who I liked and you liked and the fans liked. It wasn't just that the Guardians passed on him. No one picked him up. I think he's in Japan or Korea. I forgot which one. Which league he went to.
He would come in and give them 3-4 innings at a shot.
Yeah,
he was. Really save the bullpen.
And he was a guy that had a high ERA with San Diego, and they had given up on him, and they got him over here and fixed him right away. That's what they talk about, the pitching factory. And by the way, you're right about. I'm sure you see Andres hitting these home runs. This is the guy that they gave all the money to.
Yeah,
I mean.
But go back to Avila. Like that's what I could see Triston McKenzie moving into.
Sure.
When somebody gets knocked out in the 3rd inning, he comes in and does 3-4 innings like that, and
even 2-3
stretches it out. Yeah.
I mean, you get 9 outs in modern baseball. That's very valuable. You could pitch forever doing that. I'm very serious, and that's one of those things. Sometimes you just sit these guys down and say, "Look, this is how the world works now," and you do have a history. He had arm problems in the minors also. So if this bullpen thing could work for you, you're going to make a lot of money, and you're going to help your team.
All right, got one more email here. This is from Neil in Jamestown, New York. Neil writes us quite frequently. He says, hey, Terry, it struck me who Kyle Manzardo reminds me of, the video game character Super Mario.
Yes.
We've already had Super Joe Charbonneau and SpongeBob. Something to consider for a Manzardo moniker. So there you go.
That would be
Super Manzardo.
I forgot Quan went like way over the top of Manzardo. Didn't he say he'll anchor the lineup?
Yep.
Call him the anchor.
That was his exact words, I think.
Yeah, so. He'll anchor the lineup. but I see, you know why Quan likes him? He's a left-handed hitter, a compact swing. So Quan he knows that stuff. I mean, Quan's such a smart hitter. I mean, you could see it again. That was an interesting thing. Ariza, I'm getting the name wrong. The guy that wins a batting title every year for a different team.
Mm-hmm.
They said he and Quan led the majors in singles last year. And I know modern baseball doesn't like singles, but modern baseball does love walks. And I would actually ask them, what's the difference? It's kind of like you get on first base either way.
So there is no difference, is what we're deciding on this one, right?
But they kind of downplay singles, but he walks a lot. Well, he gets on first base, however he gets there.
I pay you to get on base, right?
I pay you to get on base. That's another Moneyball thing.
That's right.
But it is funny on how that. I think it's just a analytics reaction to too much emphasis on the batting average.
All right. Anything else on the Guardians, Terry?
All right. Jose Ramirez. It's just amazing. Remember, his arm is falling off or the wrist is broken or whatever it is. And then he comes back. He takes a day off and apparently wanted to play anyway. And then he comes back and he hit a home run and a double or something. And
yep.
And he made that play at third base. And I mean, we are watching one of the greatest players in Indians history. He's now 4 years into that 7-year deal he signed. And I just marvel at him because look at him physically. I mean, this is not Aaron Judge. This is not Jim Thome. It's not Kenny Lofton. It's this little guy. And he steals 39 bases and he hits 30 home runs and he plays every day. And he yells at these guys to hustle. And it's just, he's even underrated in this town.
Yeah, might never see his like again.
I don't
Taking
think
a
so.
contract like he did to stay here.
It's an incredible baseball story. It also is a person who knows what matters to him. Because he was oblivious to anything that Major League Baseball Union would want or what other people would say about you should have got more money or what. He's like, leave me alone, let me play ball in Cleveland where they leave me alone and let me play ball. And then I go back to the Dominican and I have my friends and my youth league. And, as he told Andre, not, $20 million is a lot. It's like you want to go put that up in, every locker room. $20 million is a lot.
Yeah, he's one of a kind. He is one of a kind. So, all right. So the Guardians are wrapping up this series in San Diego. They got a game there tonight, and then they're finishing that on Wednesday afternoon. And then they are going to be playing the Angels out in California this weekend after an off day on Thursday, and then they're off on Monday the 7th, and the home opener on Tuesday, April 8th against the White Sox at 4:10. So, all right.
By the way, did you look at that forecast for when they come back?
No. Bad?
Bring your earmuffs, baby.
Really?
Yeah.
No, we've got some cold weather opening day stories coming up here in a minute. So.
Okay.
All right. Cavaliers. What do you want to talk about the Cavaliers? I guess we're kind of get to the playoffs mode and keep everybody healthy. Jared Allen had a nice
Kenny
game.
got mad, I guess, for the first time this year. Really got mad.
Yeah.
I know because I have a pretty good relationship with Kenny, so we kind of communicate back and forth. And he was getting real because he's been pounding away on this rebounding thing for over a month. And I mean, and you know this from listening to the podcast if you have, I'm a big team rebounding guy. It's not just the big guys for two reasons. Number one, they shoot a lot of three-pointers. Three-pointers, when they miss, tend to bang way off the rim, long rebounds. Secondly, we live in the age of big men switching off onto little men. So hence your big guy, is not under the basket where you want him to be. He ends up guarding, some little guy way away. So those guards or whatever have to go and help. And Donovan Mitchell went in there and got 12 rebounds the other day. That was he had, I think what he had 38 the night before or whatever, the game before against Detroit. Then he had 12 rebounds and 20 some against the Clippers, which I think was Mitchell sending the message the coach sent that we got to get going and start playing this game the right way. And they went from giving up 19 offensive rebounds a game for, it was either two games in a row or 3 to 10. And then finally, they remembered that Jared Allen hardly ever misses.
Yeah, he has one of the all-time high NBA field goal percentages in the history of the game.
Yeah, just, look for him and just keep telling the big guy, it's almost like he's afraid to miss. It's like, no, you're allowed to miss a couple shots a game. You don't have to go 10 for 11 every game. And so I was excited to see what happened over the weekend, even though they lost to Detroit. But I think it was a thing that got them in the right frame of mind to go out and play the Clippers the right way.
Yeah, I'm seeing some things, on our subtext, which is basically Chris Fedor, Ethan Sands, and Jimmy Watkins. Cavs fans can sign up for $3.99 a month, and you kind of get insider information and behind-the-scenes stuff. But Chris Fedor was texting about how it was the first practice they've had in weeks today.
Almost a month. I think since February 28th or something like that. It was crazy.
And Chris was suspecting that they were going to be working on some playoff stuff today.
Sure.
In terms of special sets. And in between that and Kenny Atkinson's just devotion to giving these guys a lot of time off to recover, I get the sense that the Cavs are going to be ready when this playoff starts. I think they're going to be ready physically, and I think they're going to be ready in terms of strategy and just gas in the tank. I think it's on the right track from what I'm seeing.
And also where he can look at his rotations, kind of play with some different things. And
he says he wants to keep 10 guys in the rotation in the playoffs to start, which is kind of what we've been talking about.
And then if it doesn't work, you could always cut it down. Now, the one advantage to keeping 10 in the rotation, you don't want it to happen. Well, what if somebody gets hurt? So then if you go to 9, you still have had guys that are getting playoff minutes. And I'll tell you one thing. I mean, he's been kind of buried because of Ty Jerome or whatever. You could put Craig Porter in a big game. He plays with poise, and he's smart, and he's athletic.
And he rebounds.
Analytics doesn't like him because even though 3-point shooting percentage isn't bad, he's just not a 3-point shooter. He's a basketball player, and that this guy. You go back to Wichita State. He led the team in scoring, rebounding, and block shots. It might have led it in assist. He led it like everything you could lead it. And it's not like he played at Hiram, and no knock on Hiram. Roberta was on the very first women's team ever there. He played at Wichita State. They play a good schedule. And he wasn't drafted. And I love guys like that. And I think a guy like that can help you in the playoffs if need be.
All right. Yeah. Oh, I wanted to mention something real quick, Terry. So I don't know if you know this, but Jared Allen has a couple of cats, and Ashley
what
passed
is that meow stuff? What's that about?
Yeah, so that the Cavs' big motto is "Let them know," right?
Yeah,
so Ashley tracked this down and did just a fantastic job with the story. She found this fan named Dan Campbell, no relation to me, who saw that Jared Allen had 2 cats, and he's a cat owner, and he got a picture of Jared Allen with his 2 cats, and instead of let him know, he put "Let him meow." and brought it to the arena Sunday and gave it to the security people, and they got it to Jared Allen, and he was just beaming as he wore this T-shirt that a fan gave him, and it's just him and his 2 cats let him meow, which is just a wonderful
he has
play on
this
words.
Fun innocence about him. He reminds me a little bit of Carlos Carrasco, who always wanted contract extensions to stay in Cleveland. It's like apparently his agent went to Kobe, because he still had like 2 years left in his contract, and said, well, Jared wants to stay with all these guys here, and he likes it here, and he doesn't have to get a max contract like these other guys. And of course, Kobe was wise to jump right on that baby before anybody changed. But he just likes to be part of the group. By the way, he is Roberta's favorite player, is Jared Allen.
All right.
I think because of that, she likes to the enthusiasm and that. And she was very upset last year, even more than I was, when they were talking about him being soft or whatever when he was playing with broken ribs, and then finally just couldn't handle it anymore. And I think we see he's played every game this year. He had played 76 games in a row last year before finally, because he broke the ribs in the game before that. He just couldn't go anymore. So the big man, let him meow.
All right, so the Cavs are playing the Knicks on Wednesday night at home, and then they are at San Antonio on Friday, home against Sacramento on Sunday, and then next Tuesday they are home against the Bulls. We should spend a couple of minutes talking about Cleveland State basketball, Terry. Daniel Robinson, I think he won 65 games in 3 seasons with the Vikings, and they were in contention for the Horizon League regular season championship. He's leaving for North Texas, which is a bigger job with a bigger salary, and it's hard to keep a good coach at Cleveland State. It is kind of a launching pad for a lot of these coaches when they come through.
Well, it's the first time in history it is. David, do you know that? They never had a coach go to a better job until Dennis Gates.
Yeah, that's true.
So it should be a launching pad, but no, it wasn't. Just to show, because the only other really good coach Ray Derringer wasn't too bad way back in the old days, but was Gary Waters. But they brought Gary in his 50s, and so that was going to be Gary's last job, which it was. But the rest of these guys, I forgot some of these guys. They had that coach there. They were just it was really bad news. So what happened here is two things. Number one is nobody's going to from Daniel's camp talk about it directly, but the fact is Cleveland State just cut 3 sports. Big time budget. Secondly, the NIL stuff at mid-majors is just causing chaos all over the place. Thirdly, and I did not realize how good of a job North Texas was. They've really kicked their money up. They got Texas oil money and some other things involved there. And they're in that American Athletic Conference,
yep,
which
AAC.
is a good conference with Memphis State and Temple and many others. And they came after him. And I believe he thought, you know what? I got a chance to win because they were second in the league, and the last 2 years, the previous 2 coaches, one went to Texas Tech, and the other just took the West Virginia job. So that's a real launching pad for him. And meanwhile, now Cleveland State, they don't have Scott Garrett, who was a previous AD, picking the coach. He picked Dennis Gates and he picked Daniel Robinson. And both times I had to do a lot of research on these guys because I knew zero about them. But I remember Scott telling me that he wanted a guy who'd been around. He didn't want a training wheels coach in that, in other words, a 20-something assistant. He wanted a guy that had paid his dues and really recruited a lot of junior colleges and
culture. Knew what cultures. Right?
Yeah, kind of hard-ass guys. They really are. And because before that, they had like a 2.2 GPA. Some of the guys had gotten mildly in trouble under Dennis Felton. And when Scott Garrett took over, he goes, we can't have this. And how about this? When Dennis Gates told me this story, now he was at Florida State, I think for 8 or 9 years before he came here. He had interviewed a few times, didn't get a job. And he had been at other schools too before that. His last couple of years at Florida State, David, when he did a lot of junior college scouting, whatever, he had 2 sets of notebooks, as he said. One was my ACC guys can play notebook, for Florida State. He says, then I made a second notebook. If I get a mid-major job, these guys might help me. And he said a bunch of those guys from that secondary notebook were like Trago Million and some of the Des Moines Hodge, some of these other guys that Cleveland State rolled right in. And he was ready to go for both. And it seemed like, while I don't think Daniel Robinson had exactly 2 different notebooks, I think he had a second one in his head of players that I could bring with me if I get this job. Now, an interesting thing that's happened in the age of NIL and transfer portals is yes, your top junior college kids are still getting the big money and everything, but the average good junior college player who would be more valued has now really dropped off the radar. And those are the players. And some of these guys, for example, Dennis Gates brought in, they were in junior college, not because of grades. They were kind of ignored out of high school too. They're kind of funny sizes or something like that. But in a place like Cleveland State in the Horizon League with a smart coach, you can get a lot of mileage out of them. And I believe that's the kind of guy they got to get. Daniel Robinson, the same thing, where you bring these guys in here who have been undervalued, but you have to have a coach that knows how to shop that way.
So it'll be another coaching search happening at Cleveland State, and I guess one positive is that it's a $500,000 buyout,
Yeah, that's what they
buyout.
did.
North
And the
Texas
other
will have
thing
to
I want to bring up
Cleveland
too,
State.
I've been getting some emails on they ought to hire this high school coach or that high school coach. That's a tough job for a high school coach to come in and take in this environment. It just is. Now, if the great high school coach has spent 2 years, somewhere else, 2 years at Akron or something, fine, where you see how it works. But to come in cold and try to figure this thing out at a place like Cleveland State, which is challenging under the best circumstances, I just think that would be a really, really long shot way to go.
Oh, it's a different world. It's like you have to be a coach. You can't just coach. You have to be a coach, a GM, an agent,
all this
a
stuff.
negotiator.
A couple of guys that are interesting. DeAndre Haynes is at Marquette. He played at Kent State. I know the Kent people love him. And I believe he was either the runner-up to Dennis Gates or in the final three. Another name is a guy named Rob Summers, who was here with Dennis Gates, is now with at Gates at Missouri. And then the third name that I heard that is interesting, but I don't know if he'd want the job, is a guy named Adam Cohen. He's at Xavier. But those are the kind of guys. Now, you don't know who they are, but those are the kind of guys that I was told by some people who do, look at these things, at mid-major things, because I called some of my mid-major ADs and who had coaches, and I said, if you had to find a coach, give me some names. And they gave me some names, and those are some of the names.
All right. Well, there's 3 to watch, and I guess we'll see how the search goes. They're probably going to need to move fairly quickly on this because it's
yes, they do.
almost mid-April, and recruiting is always happening. So, Terry, I know you've gotten a lot of condolences from readers about the loss of your mom, Melva Hardison, 99 years old, passed away a couple weeks ago. And I know you've been dealing with a lot of that. And I think you said you wanted to talk about something that you've been kind of having to deal with in the aftermath of her passing, and you thought some people might learn from kind of what you're going through.
One of the things we're doing tomorrow at her nursing home, a really good place is St. Edward's Village in Fairlawn. At least our experience there has been terrific for 7 years. But so often the nursing homes, somebody goes off to the hospital and they die. And that's what happens. But then it's like there's no service or anything for the people who had gotten to know this person when they were at the nursing home. And not just the people that were the roommates or whatever, but also the staff. So we are doing a thing tomorrow, Roberta and I, and a friend of mine who's a grief pastor at the House of the Lord in Akron, Linda, Pastor Linda, are going to do a thing see whoever wants to come and just kind of tell some stories about Melva and some scripture reading and things like that. And I really think families should keep that in mind. If you lose someone, especially not if the person's only been there for a little while, but if they've been there, a year or more, have something. We did the same thing when Roberta's mom died. She was at a place called Concordia in Copley, and Roberta and I, and at that point, her Melva's the daughter, Gloria, who sang gospel. She was still alive. And we just kind of put one on ourselves and had some of the people tell some stories about Roberta's mom, and it went really well. So I would really urge people to do this, because it's like these, when they die, they go to the hospital, they die, and it's like they got taken away by aliens, and people are afraid to say anything about them. It's not a good thing.
Yeah, and it's a family and a community in its own way. And you're so right, Terry. Like to bring closure for those people and let them to kind of express their feelings about someone who has been lost. That's really important. And
I mean, Roberta went around. Melville loved stuffed animals. I mean, we had way too many stuffed animals in that room by the end because everybody's giving them to her. But she went around picking out different stuffed animals to give to favorite nurses, aides, and Melville's friends. And they were like thrilled to get these little rabbits and, dogs and everything else. Because it's like that was something. They knew Melville loved those animals and it was for there. So, this may all sound corny or whatever, but when you're at that stage of your life, and basically it's one loss after another, anything, any gesture, anything like that matters so much.
Important stuff, Terry. I'm glad you brought that up. That's really, really good point. Okay, I think we're going to wrap up here. We've got some opening day baseball emails. Some of them are really good. They're all really good. Our listeners never disappoint. So, all right, this first one is from Stefan from Akron. And Stefan has written before. He says, "Hey, Terry and Dave, thanks for the podcast. I've never missed an episode." Wow, thank you for that. Yeah. Living in the New York City area, this podcast helps me keep deeply connected to my teams in Cleveland. My favorite opening day memory is from April '94 while sitting on my parents' couch in upstate New York as a 10-year-old, obsessed with Cleveland baseball. While I wish my story has me in a seat in Cleveland, these are the trials and tribulations of a kid whose dad moves the family away to New York for a new job. This was the first ever game played at the brand new Jacobs Field, which was being touted as one of the best places to watch baseball in the whole sport. The entire event was a spectacle in some ways, with President Clinton throwing out the first pitch and my grandpa's favorite player, Bob Feller, looking on. For those who haven't gone back to watch the game in many years, I highly encourage it since it's a perfect encapsulation of what made the 90s Indians team so much fun. There was solid pitching from Dennis Martinez, even better pitching from Mariners ace Randy Johnson, who almost threw a no-hitter, and then big hits from classic names like Manny Ramirez, Jim Thome, and of course the walk-off from Wayne Kirby in the 11th inning that scored Eddie Murray. What a special way to bring in the new season at the ballpark with a foreshadowing of all the amazing things to come in the 90s for the Indians. While the 94 season was cut short by the strike, and we'll never know what the Indians might have been capable of in the playoffs that year, that opening day in 94 will forever be burned into my memory. So there you go. Thanks for that.
I remember walking around that ballpark, and I had been there before they, officially opened it, but seeing all those people there. And so at that point, I am 39, and I am thinking, I never thought I'd live long enough to see them in such a nice ballpark because the other stadium was that old. And I remember for the first several years, we go by the ballpark and people would just kind of look through those iron gates, just looking at it like, what is this thing doing here? We don't get this in Cleveland. And the amazing thing is, and I'm glad they keep doing work on it, it's almost an iconic ballpark.
Yeah, and it's kind of new in its own way now with all the construction and the changes and everything. So it's like a new old park. So. All right, this next one is from Patrick Vall. Patrick's from Monument, Colorado. He says, "Hello from Colorado. I grew up in South Euclid and went to my first and only opening day in 1980. My older brother and I grabbed a rapid transit train from the Green Road station downtown to see a memorable game. That day, future AL Rookie of the Year Joe Charbonneau jacked a home run. It would be the first of 23 that year. However, the highlight of the game took place when second baseman Dwayne Kuiper was knocked down by a Toronto Blue Jay pitcher brushback. Kuiper got up and promptly charged them out, landing a few punches. It remains the only fight I have seen at the numerous MLB games I have been to. I'm a lifelong Indians Guardians fan and have seen countless Cleveland games around the country. Somehow, this was my only opening day. Last year, I had plans to fly to Cleveland, witness the total eclipse, and then go to opening day with my sister, who still lives in the land. Unfortunately, a tumor was found on my right kidney a few weeks before the game. The soonest a biopsy could be done was opening day. My best laid plans were blown, but the biopsy surprisingly came back benign."
Yeah.
Wow, great news. It was not what my doctors feared. My take-home point is never take anything for granted and treat each day as a blessing. I hope 1980 won't be my only opening day, but I'm grateful for benign biopsy results. Cheers to another memorable baseball season on the corner of Carnegie and Ontario. Again, that's from Patrick Vall. Thanks, Patrick. And
1980 was my first game, regular season game,
covering the Tribe for the Plain Dealer.
Oh, okay.
Because I was hired after the 79 season in Baltimore. And I do remember walking, into that. Now, I had the feeling before of kind of awe of doing this when I came in to cover the Orioles playing there. But to be kind of walking in, because that was, at that point, my dream was to do baseball. And, there it is, opening day. And, I've been pumping up Charbonneau all of spring training. And he went out, and it's funny, I forgot about Kuiper's fight, but I do remember Joe's home run.
Yeah. I'm sure that was some memorable game. Like got a home run and a fight in the same one. So
yeah.
All right, this next one's from Justin Armstrong. He says, "Greetings. My very first Indians game and the only trip I ever made to Municipal Stadium was the 1993 home opener against the Boston Red Sox. What I remember most about the 19-and-a-half inning rain-delayed game was my uncle adamantly saying, 'Suck it up. We have to stay. We are making history. This is like being in the stands for Bob Feller's opening day no-hitter.' They ended up losing, but I remember just being glad to head to McDonald's and go home after a long day." And he wonders if it was the longest opening day game of all time. I don't know the answer to that. I suppose we could find it.
Yeah.
But he says, "Thanks from a Cleveland fan listening all the way in Okinawa, Japan." So thanks, Justin, for writing in from Japan. It's great to hear
I'm trying to remember, and I know I didn't remember that game from 93. I was on the Cavs beat then with the Beacon Journal, so I wasn't there.
Oh, all right.
So I missed a trip to McDonald's.
That's right. Okay, this next one is from Chris, and he says, "Hey, Dave and Terry, love the show. My best opening day story is 1997. I happened to be in Oakland, California when the Tribe began the season on the road. My business ended early, so I walked into the unlocked and unattended Oakland Alameda County Coliseum at about 3 p.m. I watched Chad OJ throw in the bullpen and strolled around the empty stadium and listened to the PA announcer practice saying the lineups. As I was exiting the ballpark to head to the airport, the gates opened and fans poured into the stadium. A young man walked up to me and said, 'Sir, how can I start a career in broadcasting?' I smiled, gave him some encouragement, walked out of the stadium, and flew home to Los Angeles, where I watched the Tribe beat the A's on ESPN. A question, as I think Terry's Earl Weaver stories are the best. Does Terry recall the night that Tippy Martinez picked off 3 Blue Jays in 1 inning in 1983? If yes, I would be thrilled to hear any backstories he had about Earl Weaver and the team from that night. Thanks, and keep up the great work."
No, by then I was doing the Tribe, so I did not. But Tippy Martinez is about 5'7", a little junk ball left-hander, the kind they would never, of course, put in the bullpen now because all he did was throw strikes to get people out, but he didn't have the radar gun. It was. And the other thing that was funny about Tippy Martinez, I believe he was from Colorado or somewhere, and people kept thinking because of the name that he didn't know English. And so sometimes he would kind of play dumb, and then all of a sudden, then he would break into the interview, and just pure thing, because he was bilingual. But it was a real gentleman, too. It's like, I'll tell you, the Orioles back then really had a lot of classy guys, and he was one, but I hadn't thought about Tippy Martinez picking off 3 guys. You think after the first 2.
Yeah, they would catch on. So.
By the way, David, let me ask you this. You're Nestor Cortez. You're pitching against the Yankees. The first guy hits a homer on your first pitch. The next guy hits a homer on your first pitch. Where do you throw the third pitch to the third guy?
Right into his butt, right?
You better believe it, or even another Weaver thing, throw it at his knees.
Yeah.
Cut his legs off. But you certainly don't throw it anywhere near the plate when the first 2 have been rocketed. That game was in New York, wasn't it?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah. So they were rocketed and landed somewhere in, Bayonne, New Jersey. I mean, it's just, jeez. I mean, come on. I really do. I'm very serious. I wonder about that. This is like 3 guys in a row picked off. Don't lead off. Or these guys hitting home runs. Throw it, roll it up there. Anything.
Yeah, something's
got to change. This
change.
is not hard.
All right, here's our next one from Dan Huff, and Dan is from New Jersey, and Dan says, in 1970, I was a junior at Revere High School in Bath, Richfield, and looking ahead to my senior year when my stepfather, a professor of sociology at University of Akron, accepted a position as head of the Department of Sociology at Rutgers in Newark, so I was moved kicking and screaming to finish high school in East Brunswick, New Jersey. In April 1971, I flew back to my old stomping grounds in Northeast Ohio to visit my buddies, and when they picked me up at the airport, I learned we were going to opening day at Municipal Mausoleum to see the Tribe play the Red Sox.
70.
It was in that memorable game with the Indians down 2-1 with 2 outs in the bottom of the ninth that we witnessed the legendary Gomer Hodge strike his second hit of the game, a 2-out, 2-run single for a dramatic walk-off win. I remember how excited and optimistic we were as we left the stadium. Surely this would be our year, and Gomer would become the transcendent star we longed for. And his legend only grew as he collected 2 more hits in the next few games to go 4 for 4 over his first 4 plate appearances of 1971, prompting Gomer to proclaim in an interview, "Golly, fellas, I'm hitting 4,000." Of course, we all know our belief that this was going to be the Tribe's year, or that Gomer was going to be a star isn't exactly how it played out, but it is a memory that will always live with me, and one that I remember fondly every opening day for the Cleveland Indians/Guardians. Thanks for that. That's a nice letter.
Yeah, that was
from Dan
funny.
from New
He
Jersey.
could have been right out of Mayberry RFD back then, like Gomer Pyle was, later on before that. Yeah, that's funny. And that is the nice thing about early season. Sometimes you do get these strange heroes, pop up.
Yeah.
And then that's the end of them. But yeah, Gomer.
All right, and here's our last one.
Okay.
Unless you have some more Gomer stories, I'd love to hear those.
No, I don't. Because see, at 70, I was in high school, so I wasn't covering then. Now and then I get, did you cover the 1920 World Series? It's like, no, I didn't. But
I hear the press box at League Park was just awful back then.
Yeah, right.
All right, this last one is from Ed Raditz from Sandusky, and Ed's a longtime listener. He says, "Hey, Terry and David, from the seat in front of me, you asked for the most memorable Indians-Guardians opening day, and here's mine. It was the opening day that really wasn't. I call it the Snow Bowl of 2007.
Oh, yeah.
I had invited family and friends with me to celebrate this event, my first time ever in the club seats. We savored the delicious food and tried to stay warm drinking the hot chocolate as the gift shop had no hand or foot warmers. We saw our personalized welcome on the scoreboard. We sympathized with the grounds crew as they tried with all their might to rid the field of snow multiple times with snow blowers. We laughed as a friend leapt onto the field to make a snow angel and watched in disgust as the Seattle manager, former Indian Mike Hargrove, pleaded with the umpire to stop the game in the bottom of the 5th with a 3-2 count on the batter. Just one more strike by pitcher Paul Bird, and we would have won the game. But no, the game was finally called and didn't count at all. The entire series to be played in Milwaukee. And then one of my 4 children turned around from the seat in front of me in frigid cold before the game ended and said, "Dad, I'll remember this game forever." Yes, my child, I will too. A very nice letter there from Ed. So thanks for that. Great story.
Yeah, I still remember Hargrove out there, and the fans were all screaming at Mike, "Sit down, shut up."
All right. And again, thanks for all those wonderful memories. If anybody wants to hit us with stories, emails, ideas for the podcast, just send it to sports@cleveland.com and put Terry's Talkin in the subject line. So sorry, Terry, I think I cut you off there.
No, that was it.
All right. I think we're done. You got anything else?
That is it.
All right. Well, we'll be back next week. We might need to tape on a different day because you're going to be at opening day on Tuesday, April 8th. So maybe we'll shoot for a Wednesday next week. Thanks to everybody who listens. We're going to shut down here because we're batting 4,000, right? We should quit.
That's correct. You better know when to quit.
That's right. We'll see you next week on Terry's Talkin.